The universe, in its infinite wisdom and occasional lapses in judgment, had decided that Tuesday was an excellent day for Lieutenant Commander Vex Chen to watch herself die. Again. She took another deliberate bite of her tuna sandwich. Extra pickles, light mayo, the way her grandmother used to make them before Earth got all pretentious about condiments, and observed with professional detachment as her alternate self's head separated from her shoulders in glorious high definition across the cafeteria's primary display screen. The explosion that followed painted the bridge of the UES probability in shades of crimson that would have made a Renaissance artist weep. Chen chewed thoughtfully. The tuna was a bit dry today. "Pause," commanded Sub-Commander Thrix, his four arms gesticulating wildly at the frozen carnage. The Zilithian's carapace had shifted to that peculiar shade of chartreuse that indicated either deep philosophical contemplation or severe indigestion. "Pause the feed immediately." Chen glanced around the cafeteria, noting the various states of distress among her non-human crewmates. Ensign Korvac, all 7 feet and 3 hearts of him, had gone the color of week-old moss. The Arctuan delegation had begun that low harmonic humming they did when contemplating mortality. Even the usually unflappable mechanists had stopped their eternal tinkering to stare. "Problem, Sub-Commander?" Chen asked, setting down her sandwich with the same casual precision she might use to defuse a quantum mine. "Problem?" Thrix's voice cracked across 3 octaves, a feat that would have impressed Chen if she hadn't been watching it happen during his nervous breakdowns for the past 6 months. "You just observed your own violent demise in Reality Strand Theta 7, and you're concerned about lunch portions?" "The portions are adequate," Chen replied, picking up a particularly rebellious piece of lettuce that had escaped her sandwich. Though the kitchen staff could stand to learn the difference between light mayo and mayonnaise sculpture. This is more condiment than sandwich at this point. Dr. Yillith, whose species had evolved from something resembling a cross between a praying mantis and an existential crisis, leaned forward on her 6 legs. "Commander Chen, we must discuss the psychological implications of your reaction. In 17.4 seconds of recorded footage, your alternate self-sustained catastrophic injuries that would traumatize most sapient beings for cycles. Your response involves sandwich critique." Chen considered this while chewing. The psychology of humans had become something of an obsession among the galactic community ever since they joined the Interdimensional Defense Coalition. Most species, upon discovering that reality was actually a complex web of quantum possibilities, and that military service meant occasionally watching yourself die horribly in alternate timelines, had required extensive therapy and philosophical counseling. Humans, characteristically, had asked for better catering during the briefings. "Tell me, Doctor." "Yillith," Chen said, wiping her hands on her napkin with the same methodical care she applied to weapons maintenance. "How many times have you watched yourself die this month?" The mantis philosopher's antennae twitched. "This is my first assignment involving quantum combat scenarios. The psychological preparation alone required— 14, Chen interrupted. 14 times I've watched myself get vaporized, dismembered, or otherwise redistributed across local spacetime. Last Tuesday, I watched myself get digested by a void kraken in slow motion while explaining supply requisitions to a junior officer. The Tuesday before that, I was simultaneously crushed by a collapsed bulkhead and set on fire by plasma discharge." She paused for effect. "I still filed my reports on time. Engineer Brixson, whose people resembled what would happen if someone crossed a beaver with a calculator, looked up from his perpetual note-taking. The statistical improbability of human psychological resilience in quantum combat scenarios has been documented extensively. However, the casual consumption of nutrients during traumatic observation suggests either advanced compartmentalization or severe disassociation. Or, offered Lieutenant Zara Novak from the next table, not looking up from her own lunch, some horrifying concoction involving protein paste and what the humans optimistically called vegetables. We're just used to watching terrible things happen while eating. This prompted a collective intake of breath from the assembled aliens, though the mechanist's version sounded more like a hydraulic leak. "Explain," demanded Thrix, his carapace now cycling through colors that didn't have names in most languages. Novak shrugged, a gesture that had taken the galactic community 3 months to properly interpret as casual indifference rather than aggressive dismissal. 24-hour news cycles, social media, reality television. We've been watching disasters during dinner since before we figured out interstellar travel. But this is your own death, Dr. Yillith protested, her compound eyes focusing and refocusing with mechanical precision. Your alternate self's termination represents not merely observed trauma, but existential confrontation with your own mortality across dimensional barriers. Chen finished her sandwich and reached for her coffee. Black, strong enough to strip paint, the kind of coffee that had fueled humanity's expansion into the stars primarily because it was too dangerous to leave on any inhabited planet. "Dr. Yillith," she said, taking a sip that would have dissolved the digestive system of most carbon-based life forms. "Let me ask you something. When was the last time your people went to war?" The Mantis philosopher paused. The great philosophical conflict of cycle 2847 involved heated debate over the nature of consciousness and free will. It lasted 3 cycles and resulted in strongly worded dissertations. Casualties? Several academics suffered mild depression and existential doubt. Chen nodded, as if this explained everything. Humans have been killing each other creatively for roughly 50,000 years. We've had wars over resources, territory, ideology, religion, and whether pineapple belongs on pizza. She gestured vaguely at the frozen battle footage. This is just war with better special effects. Subcommander Thrix's carapace had settled into a deep purple that suggested either profound understanding or total systems failure. You're saying that humans are psychologically adapted for warfare across multiple realities because you've been practicing on each other. "I'm saying," Chen replied, standing and collecting her tray with military precision, "that when you've spent a few millennia perfecting the art of creative violence, watching yourself die in alternate timelines is just Tuesday." She paused at the disposal unit. "Plus, the cafeteria only serves the good sandwiches during combat alerts. I wasn't going to waste the opportunity." As she walked toward the exit, the assembled aliens watched with the kind of fascination typically reserved for natural disasters or particularly elaborate suicide attempts. Behind her, the frozen image of her alternate self's demise continued to dominate the screen, a testament to quantum warfare's ultimate truth. Somewhere in the multiverse, everyone dies badly. The universe, Chen reflected, had a sense of humor. It just wasn't very good at timing. The cafeteria erupted into animated discussion the moment she left, a dozen different species trying to parse the psychological implications of apex predators who had weaponized their own mortality. But that was their problem. Chen had paperwork to file, and tomorrow there would be different footage to ignore during lunch. Admiral Kethvar had evolved from something that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet, which explained both his translucent efficiency and his tendency to organize everything into neat categorical drawers. Currently, his bioluminescent patches were cycling through what Chen had learned to recognize as bureaucratic frustration mixed with xenological curiosity, a particularly unpleasant shade of pulsing orange. "Sit," he commanded, though the word translated poorly from his native Hydrozoan. In his language, it carried undertones of assume a position of stability while we determine if you're mentally competent or a potential war crime. The debrief room had been designed by committee, which meant it successfully offended every aesthetic sensibility known to galactic civilization. Chen settled into the human-compatible chair, a grudging concession to bipedal anatomy, and faced the tribunal of alien commanders who had spent the last 47 hours debating whether humans were tactical assets or walking psychological hazards. "Commander Chen," began Captain Vorth, whose species had achieved spaceflight primarily to escape their planet's aggressively cheerful weather patterns, "we need to discuss the incident in Quantum Theater Delta 9. Chen raised an eyebrow, a gesture that had required a xenobiology course for most of the crew to properly interpret. "You mean when alternate me got turned inside out by a gravity mine while explaining logistics to Ensign Martinez?" "That incident, yes." Vorth's mandibles clicked in what might have been distress or approval. Chen had never bothered to learn the difference. "Our psychological evaluation teams have reviewed the footage 17 times. Your heart rate remained stable throughout your alternate self's inversion. Most concerning was your decision to comment on the navigation error that led to the minefield." "It was a significant navigation error," Chen replied. "Someone input the wrong coordinates for the asteroid field. Basic piloting failure." Colonel Ixtal, a being who looked like someone had given a tree trunk delusions of grandeur and military rank, leaned forward with the sound of creaking wood. "You critiqued tactical decision-making while watching your own organs achieve external configuration. The Psychological Review Board has never encountered such compartmentalization." "We have," interjected Dr. Nerix, the ship's xenopsychologist, whose species had evolved from something between a therapy couch and a nervous breakdown. "Extensive research into human military history reveals consistent patterns of emotional dissociation during combat scenarios." Admiral Kethavar's patches brightened to an interrogatory yellow. "Explain." Dr. Nerix consulted her multidimensional data pad with tentacles that moved like an octopus having an anxiety attack. "Historical records indicate human soldiers have demonstrated remarkable psychological compartmentalization across numerous conflicts. During the Terran conflict designated World War II, human medical personnel performed surgery while their facilities were under active bombardment. They allegedly made jokes about the explosions disrupting their sutures." "That's not dissociation," Chen said, accepting the coffee that a service drone delivered with mechanical indifference. "That's Tuesday in a field hospital. You work with what you've got." Captain Vorth's mandibles clicked more rapidly. "But these are your alternate selves dying. Quantum warfare means confronting infinite variations of your own mortality. How do you process the existential implications?" Chen took a sip of coffee that could have powered a small spacecraft and considered the question with the same attention she might give to requisition forms. "Captain, have you ever been in actual combat?" The Vorthak reconciliation involved extensive negotiation and eventual treaty signing. There was some raised voice discussion about territorial boundaries. "Right." Chen set down her cup with a clink that somehow managed to sound judgmental. "Engineer Rodriguez, you're human. Help me out here." Chief Engineer Maria Rodriguez looked up from the technical readouts she'd been reviewing with the dedication of someone trying to ignore the philosophical implications of quantum mortality. "Remember boot camp, Commander?" Day 3, Drill Sergeant Morrison made us watch training footage of various ways military personnel had died in the field. After the first dozen, we started betting on cause of death. The assembled aliens exchanged glances that suggested either profound horror or the beginning of an interdimensional incident. "You gambled on human mortality?" Dr. Nerix's voice achieved a pitch that hadn't been heard since her species discovered existential philosophy. "We gambled on everything," Rodriguez continued, with the cheerful, matter-of-fact tone humans used when describing activities that would traumatize most galactic civilizations. "Death, injury, equipment failure, weather patterns. Humans bet on whether it'll rain during their own funerals. It's pattern recognition training disguised as coping mechanism. Colonel Ixtal's wooden form creaked ominously. Pattern recognition for death? Survival, Chen corrected. You learn to identify threats, assess probability, and maintain operational effectiveness regardless of personal risk. The quantum warfare angle just expanded the dataset. Admiral Kethvar's bioluminescence shifted to a color that didn't exist in standard galactic chromatic references. Commander, our analysts have identified something unusual in your quantum combat performance metrics. Your tactical effectiveness increases when observing your alternate deaths. Most species show degraded performance under such psychological stress. Chen nodded, as if this was perfectly reasonable. Makes sense. Each alternate death provides tactical intelligence about what doesn't work in that scenario. Why would I ignore valuable operational data because it happens to involve my own disintegration? The silence that followed was the kind typically reserved for natural disasters or theological revelations. You're using your own mortality as battlefield intelligence, Dr. Nerix said slowly, as if testing the words for structural stability. I'm using available resources to improve mission outcomes, Chen replied. It's basic military doctrine. Captain Vorth's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, which Chen had learned indicated either deep thought or system failure. Commander, we've been studying human combat footage for 3 standard cycles. Your species demonstrates consistent anomalous behavior during warfare. Singing during bombardments, creating art in trenches, playing card games while under siege. Entertainment helps pass time during combat lulls, Rodriguez offered. Plus, poker teaches probability assessment and risk management under pressure. Singing maintains group cohesion. Art provides psychological processing mechanisms, all tactically relevant. Admiral Kethvar's patches were now cycling through colors that required new names. You've weaponized recreational activities. Chen finished her coffee and stood, recognizing the signs of an extended philosophical discussion that would accomplish nothing beyond alien existential crisis. Admiral, with respect, you're overcomplicating this. Humans adapt. We've been doing it for a few 100,000 years. Quantum warfare is just the latest adaptation. But the psychological implications, Dr. Nerix began, are someone else's problem, Chen interrupted. I have a mission brief in 20 minutes and 3 alternate realities to coordinate tactical solutions with. The universe keeps trying to kill us in creative ways. We keep finding creative ways to stay alive long enough to file paperwork about it. She paused at the door, struck by a thought that seemed worth sharing. Besides, she added, you're asking the wrong question. The tribunal waited with the patience of beings who had evolved beyond the need for immediate gratification. You keep wondering how we handle watching ourselves die, Chen continued. You should be wondering why we're still alive to watch it. The door sealed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving behind a room full of aliens contemplating the uncomfortable possibility that they had been asking the wrong questions about humanity for quite some time. 3 decks below the debrief room, in a section of the ship that existed primarily as a monument to bureaucratic overreach and the galactic community's obsession with documentation, Archivist Prime Velnara was having what her species diplomatically termed a cognitive restructuring event. Less diplomatically, she was losing her collective mind. Query: historical documentation, Terran military conflicts, chronological parameters, all available records. She commanded the archive system with the mechanical precision that had made her people the galaxy's premier information specialists. Her 4 research assistants, a carefully selected mix of species chosen for their analytical capabilities and psychological stability, clustered around the holographic displays that began materializing in the chamber. What they saw defied every established model of rational warfare. "This cannot be accurate," muttered research specialist Corinth, whose people had achieved mathematical perfection roughly 3,000 years before discovering fire. His crystalline form reflected the archival data in fractal patterns that hurt to look at directly. Cross-reference: Battle of Stalingrad, Terran, year 1942. Human soldiers allegedly composed poetry while engaged in urban combat operations lasting 214 standard days. Velnara's sensory apparatus extended toward the display with the careful precision of someone examining evidence of a particularly elaborate hoax. Display examples. The archive complied, projecting samples of human wartime literature with timestamps indicating composition during active combat scenarios. The poetry was, by galactic standards, terrible. It was also psychologically impossible. Analysis suggests creative expression during mortal peril, offered junior archivist Zimtel, whose species evolved from creatures that resembled anxious librarians, a development that had surprised absolutely no one. But the psychological demands of survival should preclude artistic endeavors. Should, agreed Velnara, but observe the broader pattern. Display: Human conflict designated Napoleonic Wars. Focus on musical documentation. New data streams materialized, showing human military units maintaining orchestral arrangements during multi-year campaigns. Soldiers improvising instruments from battlefield debris. Entire regiments learning complex harmonies while marching across continents where survival was a daily uncertainty. Corinth's crystalline structure began emitting a low harmonic that indicated either deep analysis or structural failure. Query: Military effectiveness during these recreational activities? Cross-referencing tactical outcomes with documented recreational behavior, Velnara replied, her multiple processing centers working in harmony to correlate impossible data sets. Results are counterintuitive. The displays shifted, showing victory to defeat ratios, strategic success rates, and morale indicators across human military history. The pattern was unmistakable and absolutely maddening. Higher recreational activity correlates with increased combat effectiveness, Zimtel announced with the tone of someone discovering fundamental mathematics had been installed backwards. Human military units with documented artistic, gaming, or social activities demonstrate superior tactical performance across all measured parameters. Research specialist Thief, whose people resembled a cross between a sage and a filing error, gestured toward additional data streams with tentacles that moved like confused question marks. Examine: Terran conflict designated Vietnam War. Human personnel developed elaborate recreational drug subcultures while conducting asymmetric warfare operations in hostile jungle environments. Drugs as tactical enhancement? Corinth's harmonic shifted to frequencies that suggested either breakthrough insight or complete system collapse. Negative, Thief replied, consulting readouts that seemed to contradict themselves with every refresh. Documentation suggests recreational drug use actually impaired combat performance. However, the social bonding and psychological coping mechanisms developed around substance consumption created unit cohesion that improved overall effectiveness despite individual impairment. Velnara paused all processing to focus her entire analytical capacity on this single data point. Humans weaponized recreational self-harm for tactical advantage. Appears so, Zimtel confirmed, pulling up additional documentation. Further analysis reveals consistent patterns across historical periods. Human military forces consistently engage in activities that should compromise operational security and individual performance, yet achieve strategic objectives at rates that exceed mathematical prediction models. The archive chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of quantum storage systems processing impossible correlations. Display current documentation, human performance in quantum warfare scenarios, Velnara commanded, dreading what the analysis might reveal. New data cascaded through the holographic displays, showing human crews across the Interdimensional Defense Coalition. The patterns were there, clear as stellar radiation and twice as dangerous to long-term psychological health. Human crews played zero-gravity sports during combat alerts. They organized cooking competitions using military rations and equipment improvised from weapons systems. They held elaborate betting pools on everything from equipment failure rates to alien psychological reactions to human behavior. Focus on UES probability, current deployment, Corinth requested, his harmonic now achieving frequencies that approached philosophical enlightenment or total breakdown. The displays narrowed to show their own ship's human contingent. Commander Chen's lunch behavior was merely the visible tip of an iceberg of systematic recreational normalization of mortal peril. During quantum combat operations, human crew members maintained detailed rankings of most creative alternate death, organized pool tournaments in between reality strand coordination duties, conducted amateur psychology experiments on alien crew reactions, established elaborate gift exchanges based on quantum probability outcomes. "They're studying us," Theiff observed, with the kind of calm that preceded species-wide existential crisis. "While we analyze their psychological responses to quantum warfare, they're conducting behavioral research on our responses to their psychology." Velnara's processing centers synchronized to achieve maximum analytical clarity, a state her people reserved for discoveries that might reshape fundamental understanding of reality. Display human quantum warfare effectiveness metrics compared to all other coalition species. The results materialized with the inexorable certainty of a natural law being discovered in real time. Human tactical success rates in quantum combat scenarios exceeded all other species by margins that fell outside statistical possibility. More critically, human crews showed improving performance over time, while other species demonstrated declining effectiveness due to accumulated psychological stress. "They're not just adapted for quantum warfare," Zimtel announced quietly. "They're evolving into it." "Query," Corinth said, his harmonic achieving perfect mathematical harmony. "What happens when a species that weaponizes recreational activities encounters warfare across infinite realities?" The archive system processed this question with the careful attention it reserved for queries that might break fundamental physical laws. The answer, when it came, was displayed with the kind of clinical precision that made terrible news easier to process. Analysis complete. Human crews demonstrate exponential adaptation to quantum warfare conditions. Projected timeline to full quantum tactical integration. 18 standard months. Warning: current human recreational activities suggest development of cross-reality coordination. Capabilities beyond designed mission parameters. Recommendation: immediate review of human operational clearance levels. Caution: this recommendation may already be irrelevant. Velnara stared at the displays with the kind of focused attention that preceded either breakthrough insight or complete psychological restructuring. Around her, the research team processed the implications of what they had discovered about the species they thought they were studying. "One more query," she said quietly. "Display: human recreational activities during current quantum deployment, classification level maximum." The new data streams were coded with security classifications that required 4-level authorization just to acknowledge they existed. What they revealed was worse than anyone had suspected. The humans weren't just adapting to quantum warfare. They were having fun with it. And somewhere in the deepest levels of the classification system, a note appeared that made Velnara's entire analytical framework recalibrate itself around a terrible possibility. Cross-reference complete. Human recreational activities during quantum warfare operations demonstrate coordinated transdimensional communication protocols. Conclusion: humans are using quantum warfare as recreational networking infrastructure. The archive chamber systems began processing this information with the kind of careful attention reserved for discoveries that might accidentally break the universe. Outside, in the ship's cafeteria, Commander Chen was probably finishing dinner and making casual observations about tomorrow's tactical operations, while her alternate selves died spectacularly across 17 different realities. And somewhere in the quantum foam that connected all possible universes, those alternate selves were probably comparing notes. Commander Vex Chen stood in Communications Bay 7, a section of the ship that officially didn't exist and unofficially served as humanity's answer to the question, what happens when you give apex predators access to multidimensional infrastructure? The bay hummed with equipment that looked suspiciously like standard quantum warfare coordination systems, except for the modifications that would have made the engineering department file incident reports in 17 different languages. Jury-rigged interfaces connected to standard military hardware, unauthorized quantum, resonance chambers built from repurposed coffee makers, and navigation computers. A sophisticated network that had been constructed entirely from components that individually appeared in no regulation manual but collectively violated several fundamental laws of quantum mechanics. "Afternoon, Commander," called Specialist Torres from behind a console that was definitely not supposed to be emitting that particular shade of purple. "Ready for the 1400-hour sync?" Chen settled into the central coordination chair, a piece of furniture that had started life as a standard command seat before being modified with components that included, but were not limited to, parts of the espresso machine from Deck 12. Status report. Reality Strand Theta 7 is running the Kepler station scenario again, reported Sergeant Kim, whose technical expertise had somehow expanded to include quantum engineering, despite her official specialty being logistics. Chen 7 says the Zephyrian assault pattern is getting predictable. She's requesting permission to implement the Madagascar protocol. "Denied," Chen replied without hesitation. "Madagascar protocol is reserved for existential threats only. Chen 7 knows this." Specialist Okafor looked up from a console that was definitely not regulation and probably not safe. "Chen 12 wants to know if we're still betting on alien psychological breakdown timelines. She says her ship's xenopsychologist achieved complete cognitive restructuring yesterday after discovering humans play poker during reality storms." Chen smiled the kind of smile that had made her excellent at her job and terrible at dinner parties. "Tell Chen 12 that's off-limits betting until next Tuesday. We don't want to collapse local probability curves before the mission review." The casual exchange continued around the bay as dozens of alternate reality Chens coordinated tactical operations across the quantum battlespace with the same professional efficiency they brought to requisition forms and personnel evaluations. What the alien command staff had interpreted as psychological compartmentalization was actually something far more sophisticated and considerably more dangerous to galactic peace of mind. Lieutenant Wong entered the bay carrying a tray of sandwiches that were definitely not from the official commissary. "Lunch delivery," she announced. "Chen 4 specifically requested extra pickles for the substrate analysis." "Substrate analysis?" Chen asked, accepting her sandwich with the careful attention of someone handling precision instruments. "She's been testing whether quantum flavor variance correlates with dimensional stability," Wong replied, as if this was perfectly reasonable. "Preliminary results suggest that properly balanced condiments can enhance cross-reality communication clarity by 12%. Chen took a bite of her sandwich and immediately felt the subtle shift in quantum resonance that indicated successful connection to the broader network. Around the bay, her alternate selves were doing exactly the same thing, each bite calibrated to maintain the delicate balance of multidimensional coordination that had taken human engineers 6 months to perfect. The tuna was, as always, exactly the right balance of protein and quantum-stable isotopes. The pickles provided the acidic contrast necessary for neural pathway optimization. The mayonnaise, despite her earlier complaints, contained trace minerals that enhanced bioelectric conductivity across dimensional boundaries. What the aliens had observed as casual lunch behavior was actually the most sophisticated communication protocol in the known universe, disguised as a sandwich. "Incoming priority transmission from Chen 23, announced Torres, consulting readouts that would have sent the ship's official communications officer into professional cardiac arrest. "She says the Dominion fleet is moving into position for the final assault. All alternates are ready for coordinated response." Chen finished her sandwich and stood, feeling the familiar tingle of quantum synchronization as 23 alternate versions of herself prepared for simultaneous tactical operations across multiple reality strands. The aliens had spent months analyzing human psychology, while humans had spent the same time building an interdimensional command network that used their own deaths as data points and their lunch breaks as coordination windows. "Signal all alternates," she commanded, walking toward the central transmission array that had been constructed from salvaged quantum warfare equipment and what appeared to be most of Deck 9's recreational facilities. "Operation Probability Storm is authorized. Execute Madagascar Protocol across all reality strands." The bay filled with harmonic resonance as the human-built quantum network activated fully for the first time. Across 17 different realities, 17 different versions of the UES probability engaged enemy forces with coordinated precision that made standard military doctrine look like finger painting. In Reality Strand Alpha, Chen Alpha used intelligence gathered from Chen 7's death to avoid the gravity mine that had killed her counterpart. In Beta Strand, Chen Beta implemented tactical solutions developed by Chen 12's successful defense against the same Dominion assault pattern. In Gamma Reality, Chen Gamma executed a flanking maneuver that had been tested and refined through the systematic deaths of 8 alternate selves. What the galactic community had interpreted as human psychological adaptation to quantum warfare was actually the weaponization of death itself. Every alternate casualty provided tactical intelligence. Every observed demise refined strategic options. Every lunch break coordination session uploaded solutions across dimensional boundaries. The humans hadn't adapted to quantum warfare. They had hijacked it. "Commander," called Specialist Torres, monitoring readings that officially didn't exist on equipment that definitely shouldn't work. "We're receiving congratulations from alternates across the network. Dominion fleets neutralized in all active reality strands. 0 human casualties recorded." Chen nodded with the satisfaction of someone whose job involved preventing galactic annihilation before dinner. "Excellent. Signal all alternates to maintain standard communication protocols. Tomorrow's menu includes the roast beef special, and I want to run probability analyses on the new sauce recipe." Around the bay, her crew continued their work with the casual efficiency that had convinced the galaxy that humans were either psychologically invulnerable or completely insane. The truth, as usual, was considerably more interesting. They had taken the universe's most sophisticated warfare technology and turned it into a networking protocol. They had weaponized lunch. They had used their own mortality as a tactical advantage and made it look like casual indifference to existential horror. And tomorrow they would do it again, because the universe kept trying to kill them in creative ways, and humans had developed an equally creative response. They had learned to kill it back from multiple directions simultaneously, while maintaining proper nutrition and filing accurate reports. Chen walked toward the exit, already planning the after-action briefing that would politely omit most of the relevant details, while providing enough information to prevent alien psychological collapse. Behind her, the quantum communication array powered down with the contented hum of technology being used for purposes its designers never imagined, and probably wouldn't approve of. In 3 hours, she would sit in the cafeteria and watch alternate versions of herself die horribly while eating dinner. The aliens would observe with fascination and horror, never suspecting that each bite was a carefully calibrated signal to parallel realities where other versions of herself were making sure those deaths served a purpose. The universe, she reflected as she stepped into the corridor, was a dangerous place full of beings trying to kill each other for resources, territory, and ideology. Fortunately, humans had always been excellent at that sort of thing. They had just gotten better equipment,